Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be exploring a profoundly beautiful and honestly deeply challenging set of principles today. Specifically, we'll be looking at the source text of Ayah 1 through 10. This text dives right into the shared origins of humanity and the really heavy moral duties we carry toward one another. We're going to gently unpack what this historical framework tells us about human connection and, more importantly, how it tests our ethical responsibilities. So let's just dive right in.
Section 1. Redefining your net worth. A moral ledger.
Okay, let's dive into this. Take a second and just think about this idea. Your net worth isn't what's in your bank account. It's how you handle the money that doesn't belong to you. Read that again in your mind. In our modern world, we are constantly taught to measure our value by personal accumulation. We look at our assets, our properties, our literal bank balances, and we assign ourselves a worth. But the source material we're looking at today completely flips that on its head. It challenges the very foundation of how we measure a successful life, basically demanding that we look outwardly at our obligations rather than inwardly at our possessions. This text fundamentally reframes how we measure value. It establishes that a true ledger of your life isn't financial at all, it's deeply moral. It's really about how you act when you're given power, trust, and leverage over folks who are vulnerable.
Section 2. The single soul concept. The origin of humanity.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that to truly grasp these ethical obligations, we have to go all the way back to the very beginning. Think about this core definition of the single soul, the concept that all of humanity shares a single common origin. This isn't just presented as some nice, poetic metaphor in the text. No, it is the absolute structural foundation for literally everything that follows. Because we all come from one singular source, the vulnerable people in society, the ones who desperately need our help and protection, they aren't others, they aren't strangers. They are, quite literally, an extension of us.
Think of this shared origin as the first molecule. This universal human connection acts as the bedrock for the entire ethical system laid out in Ayah 1 through 10. By establishing this deep, almost cellular empathy right at the beginning, the text is quietly preparing us. It's telling us that because we're all cut from the exact same cloth, the strict societal rules regarding how we treat the weakest among us aren't just arbitrary laws or government mandates. They're fundamental duties to our own extended family. You literally cannot harm another person without, in essence, harming a part of your own origin.
Section 3. Protecting the orphan's wealth. A sacred trust.
We've just looked at the macro origin of humanity, the grand sweeping concept of the single soul. Now the text zooms all the way in to a highly specific mandate. And this brilliantly illustrates a key contrast. On the one hand, you have what belongs to you, your personal wealth, your daily earnings, the stuff you have every right to consume. But on the other hand, you have what belongs to the orphan, explicitly defined here as a sacred trust. The source material is drawing a sharp, unmistakable line. It's one thing to manage your own assets, right? But it's an entirely different, incredibly weighty responsibility to be the guardian of wealth that does not belong to you, especially when the true owner is powerless to stop you from taking it.
The text sets a very deliberate, very hard line on this issue. The sanctity of the orphan's wealth is absolute. There's absolutely no gray area here. There's no room for borrowing against it, no allowance for mismanagement, and certainly no excuse for consuming it out of greed. It's presented not merely as a legal boundary, but as a profoundly sacred one. When you're entrusted with the well-being of an orphan, you are actively being tested on that core concept we discovered earlier, your true connection to the single soul.
Section 4. The consequence of fire. A severe warning.
And this brings us to the real climax of the text message. Because this trust is considered so deeply sacred, the penalties for breaking it are described with uncompromising severity. The text literally states that consuming the wealth of the orphan is like eating fire into your own belly. Just take a second and sit with that visceral image. It is devastating. The text doesn't just say that stealing from an orphan is a crime or that it's just legally wrong. It uses this terrifying imagery of internal, self-inflicted destruction. By taking what belongs to the absolute most vulnerable, you aren't just harming them, you are fundamentally consuming something that will burn you from the inside out. It is a spiritual and moral poison.
So the crucial point is how perfectly these concepts intertwine. This severe ethical warning connects our macro origins directly back to our micro actions. The text argues that because we come from a single soul, violating the trust of an orphan isn't just theft. It's actually an act of violence against the very fabric of humanity itself. That universal connection makes the crime deeply, inescapably personal. And that is exactly why the warning of fire is so severe. You simply cannot burn a part of the single soul without catching fire yourself.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a profound question to really chew on. How do you handle the sacred trusts and the power over the vulnerable in your own life? The source text from Ayah 1 through 10 might be ancient, but the ethical framework it presents, evaluating our true net worth by how we treat those who have no power to fight back, is intensely, beautifully relevant today. Whether it's managing resources, leading a team at work, or simply caring for dependents, we all face these tests of character. Think about your own sacred trusts. I hope this deep dive into the source material has given you a powerful new perspective to reflect on. Keep learning and keep asking the big questions.